Hi, I'm Allie Hamilton, and I'm so happy to welcome you to the Come As You Are podcast. Every week, we'll be talking about some aspect of healing, usually around childhood wounds and complicated familial relationships. The topics will always coincide with my personal essay of the week, and this will be a place where we can take a deep dive together. I'm so thrilled you've joined me and delighted for you to always come as you are. Hi there. Hi there. Welcome to our talk. Today, the topic is Stairway to Heaven. Stairway to Heaven. And I was writing about this experience I had when I was 4 years old at the playground. And it was not long after my grandmother, my mother's mother, died the week before I turned 4. And it set off like a chain reaction. It kind of exploded my little universe. Prior to that event, my mom and dad were married. They were, we were living in an apartment together on the Upper West Side in New York City. And we saw my grandma, who I called Nanny, every day. My mother and her mother were extremely close. And my mother was 24 when she had me. My dad was 20 years older than my mother. And he had had 2 kids with his first wife from his first marriage. So I was his third child. I was my mother's first. And my mother had a lot of trauma in her life. She lost her dad when she was 13. And then her mother when she was 28 and I was about to be 4. And as it turned out, the last year of my parents' marriage, things were really not good. My mother had found out when she was 7 months pregnant with me that my dad was having an affair. And I think she found out actually when I was 3 months old, and then discovered it had started when she was 7 months pregnant. That's right. So it really destroyed her. And that continued throughout the rest of their marriage. And according to her, they had been blissfully happy until she got pregnant. So there's just a lot of stuff there. And so basically they were keeping up appearances that last year because my mother's mother was so sick. She had cancer. She had breast cancer. They thought she had a cold, and it turned out she wasn't getting better. And it turned out that she had breast cancer. By the time they realized it had spread everywhere, it was too late. So what ended up happening is my grandmother died, and the next week I found my mother sitting alone at the dining room table, and she told me that my dad was not going to live with us anymore, that eventually he's had left. He was going to, he's looking for his own place. And eventually, once he found his own place, I would visit him in his new apartment, but that my home was with her. And I just could not make sense of any of that. I could not believe that my dad would have left without saying goodbye. I could not understand that my grandmother had died. I was writing last week about the day my grandmother died and not being able to, I was not allowed in the room with her. I didn't know where heaven was or how to get there. There was just a lot going on there that I was trying to process. And my mom, what ended up happening is I think she was just, I was writing in the comments today underneath the essay, this week's essay, Stairway to Heaven, which is more like a story really than an essay. It's more that I lately have been feeling this kind of through line from my grandmother to my mother to me. I have felt my grandmother with me my entire life. I don't feel like my grandmother ever really left me. But I feel in a way when I think about what happened at that time when she died and then what happened right after, it's almost like the three of us were sharing a nervous system. And when my grandmother died, it's like we all died for a short amount of time. The life we had was gone, it was over. And it took a minute for this kind of like new life to emerge. And the new life did not feel safe or loving anymore. It felt scary and confusing and overwhelming. And my mother, I think, was really, first of all, I've now lost my mother. And I know what an overwhelming, painful, it's like the biggest loss I have experienced in my life. Really knocked me sideways. So, I think about her now going through that at 28 with a 4-year-old and a husband who had just left. And it just breaks my heart. So I think she was really ill prepared I think she was already struggling to mother me before that happened. And I think that's one of the reasons her mother was always there. I think my grandmother was there just to kind of make sure I was going to be okay. My mother was going to just be like this big support for both of us. And so when she was gone, it really had a huge impact. And my mother took me to a farm. I've written about it a lot. I've talked about it. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it, but it was a farm of a friend of hers who lived there with her daughter, and she dropped me off there. I did not know that's what was going to happen. I thought we were going to visit this farm together. That's kind of what she had said to me. And then when we got there, it became clear to me that, we went to the grocery store. She was like buying all the food that I like. And we got back to the farm. She was saying the kind of things she would say to the sitter, like what time I go to bed and like what time I get up and, sharing details. And I started to panic because I realized she's going to leave me at this farm with this person I don't know and her daughter who, wasn't being super friendly, just in that way that kids, it takes a while to warm up. And so she left, and I basically was on this farm for some amount of time that I'll never know how long it was. My sense is it was at least a few weeks. And I just did not know if I was ever going to see anyone again that I knew and loved. I didn't know anyone's phone number. I didn't know how to reach anybody. And she had said to me, I need you to be good. Like, I need to rest and I need you to be good, which meant like, don't cry. Don't be any trouble here, that kind of thing. Eventually she came and got me, and we went back to the apartment where I had lived since I was 2, for as long as I could remember. And this new life began. And the new life was, eventually, it didn't happen right away. My dad, I think it took a few months for him to find a new apartment, maybe even a little bit longer than that. But eventually I started going back and forth, and I was doing like 3 nights at my dad's, 4 nights at my mom's. And then the next week it would be 4 nights at my mom's, 3 nights at my dad's. My mom started working again full time, and just everything changed. I had been in a nursery school, and I went to this daycare, then I was in a preschool, and then I was in this pre-kindergarten class, pre-K class. And my dad moved in immediately with the woman who eventually became my stepmom. But he was also seeing other women instantly. And he would pick me up from my mom's, and we would go to some woman's house, and he would like park me in front of the TV, and then we'd go home to his girlfriend, who was very sweet to me. And she would have dinner on the table and she'd say, like, what did you do? Or where did you go? And he would say, we went to the museum, or, we went to the park. And I would be quiet because he would tell me that she'd be very hurt if she knew that we went to like this person's house or that person's house. She wouldn't understand. And he would say, I didn't do anything wrong. We're just friends. We're just rehearsing. He's an actor. But they were not just friends and they were not just rehearsing. He would go into the bedroom with these women and park me in front of the TV. And as I got older, I realized what the noises were that I was hearing. It was not that. So I, there was a time pretty early on in that whole situation, and I would miss my mother. I'd be over there at my dad's new place, which was kind of like this big open loft space. He had a loft. I had a loft. There wasn't any privacy, in other words. And, if I said I missed my mom and I wanted to call her, his girlfriend would take that really personally. My dad would look stricken, so like, I just realized, okay, I'm not allowed to say that I miss my mom. It just was, I tried to tell my dad once that I wish things could go back the way that they had been. And he started sobbing in my arms and said he needed to be free and he couldn't commit. And, if only like all these women could just share. And I, first of all, was very scared that, to have your dad, who's like, at the time, my dad was 6'1", crying in my arms was terrifying. It's scary for a kid. You don't want to feel like you're the one who's supposed to make everything better. At 4, intuitively, that is way above my pay grade. I don't know how to do that, so to be put in that position is terrifying. To see your parent, who's supposed to hopefully be keeping you safe, falling apart like that is really scary. And so I would instantly tell, I said, don't worry, it's okay, like trying to make him feel better. And then he started making a habit of that, where he would talk to me about his very grown-up problems and his need to, how he couldn't commit and all that. And I thought, oh, these women are terrible. If only they would share my poor dad, everything would be great. Because you don't know when you're 4 or 5 or 6, you don't know. And then at my mom's, she, if I said to her, like, I miss Nanny, that's what I called my grandmother, or I miss you when I'm at dad's, or I don't like this, she would get furious. Like, how do you think I feel? You should think about how I feel, and then she wouldn't want to talk to me. So I learned quickly to keep my feelings to myself. That if I expressed sadness or if I expressed fear or anxiety, it was not going to be met with anything comforting or reassuring. It was going to end up being, I'd be punished for it one way or another. It would only make things worse. And, you learn quickly as a kid. You're a little sponge, you realize. And with my mother, the last thing I wanted on the nights that I had her, which I didn't even have her that much because I was at my dad's half the time. And then she was on a mission to find a new husband, which I understand in a different light now than I did as a kid. Again, 4, 5, 6, 7, you do not understand. But this was 1975. And it had only been 1 year that women could have their own credit cards, their own bank accounts. I think she really felt like the best way to keep us safe was to find a husband. And so even on the nights that I would come back and be with her, a lot of the time she would pick me up from my school. For a while there was like an after school program, and there was like the pre-K class. There's, she would pick me up on her way home from work, and I would ask her, are you going to be home tonight? But I had to be careful even like how I asked her, because she did not want me to make her feel bad if she was going out. I just learned to be careful and if I was struggling, to keep it to myself, which is very hard when you're a little kid. It's like not great to have the wiring start to get set up that way, that you're going to hold everything in. And when you're having these big feelings as a little kid, that's just, you're too little to be holding all that. There's just not, you're not equipped to manage that kind of thing. But that's what was happening. And I went from, I think, a pretty open, laughing, enthusiastic kid who felt really loved and all that, to being really kind of quiet and watchful and not sure if I was safe and just trying to figure things out by myself. So I'm now in this new like pre-K class, not long after all of these things. I'm going back and forth. So now I'm, seeing my dad again. My grandmother has been gone for a few months at this time, I think, probably like 4 months. My mother's working, I'm in that rhythm now, just trying to like figure it out. And we went to this playground. I didn't know anyone. I switched into this class, I think mid-year. I think the hours were longer, so it worked better. And we were at a playground, and I didn't really know anyone yet. And there was a climbing structure, and I was writing about those not too long ago either. In the 70s in New York City, if you can Google climbing structures, New York City, 1970s, you will laugh. It is like, I mean, they're crazy. It's a good laugh. They're like these giant metal structures that today there is no way, because the liability, there's just no way. You never get insurance for a playground like this. But they would have these giant metal structures that were like, square shaped and kind of like pyramid, whatever. And they get higher and higher, and they'd be like 20 feet high, and there'd be like one at the top. And then the one that I was writing about in this story, it was like shaped like a rainbow, but it was kind of like a ladder. It's like a metal ladder in the shape of a rainbow. And I had started climbing, and I realized that it was harder than it had looked as I was getting higher. The rungs were further apart than they seemed. And as I, got up to like whatever that fourth one, I thought, this is just not for me. This is too high. The ground is just looking like too far down there. And I wanted to start climbing back down the way I'd come. And I realized when I looked back, there were 2 kids coming up already behind me. And it didn't even cross my mind to say, like, hey, I want to come down. Could you let me down? Like, no. And they were older. They were not part of the school. They were just at the playground. And so they were fast. So I started to feel like, okay, I have to like hurry. So I was trying to climb faster. And I got to sort of like the apex, and I realized, then it was really scary because I looked down and the rungs were really far apart, and I felt like I could just very easily fall through. And I understood I was going to have to turn my body around so I could back down that second half. Otherwise, I'd be sort of crawling head first toward the ground. I knew, physics-wise, that was not going to work. And at this point, these kids were like, they had climbed up as high as they were waiting on me. And they kind of like looked at each other like, oh, great, this baby, like we have to, wait. I was just feeling all that like pressure. So I tried to navigate the turn. I should like turn my body around, and I had to like swing a leg around. And as I went to do that, the like toe of my sneaker got caught in the rung behind me, and I lost I probably panicked. Whatever it is that happened, I lost my grip with one hand, And then I went to try to like save myself, and I must have like flailed or whatever it is that I did. I lost my grip with the other hand, and the next thing I knew, I had bashed my nose on one of the rungs, and suddenly I was falling. And I hurtled to the ground. I like hit the ground and was like dazed and rolled onto my back and was just kind of stunned there for probably not as long as it felt, but I was just looking up at the sky. I don't think I lost consciousness or anything. I just think I was just really in shock. And I was looking up at the sky, and I saw, I saw the treetops, and, sort of like the edge of the play structure. And then like way, way up above in the sky, I saw birds. And I started, wondering if the birds could get to heaven. And if birds ever did that, if they ever, because they were so high up in the sky, if they visited people in heaven, and if maybe like my nanny could see these same birds that I was looking at. And I think I was just in this state of missing her all the time. And so many things that were happening were so uncomfortable for me, like regularly. And I was writing about circle time, which I think it's still ongoing. But all of the schools that I had been to, I never enjoyed circle time, even before all this stuff happened. I just didn't like that feeling of having to perform. And circle time, in case it isn't something you went through in your school or whatever, but it would be like you'd sit around in a circle at the beginning of the day, and there'd be some kind of like musical component. It could be tambourines or like maracas or drums or something, and there'd be a song, some like welcome song, and it was an easy song, and you'd learn it quickly. And basically the song would pause, and you'd call out like the next kid's name. And then that kid would have to say like, hi, I'm whatever, whatever their name was. And maybe like one thing about them, or just depended on the school or depended on the day. It could be like, you would say your age, or you would say your favorite color, or you would say something like funny, or something that happened on the way to school, or something. After all this stuff happened, the idea of 20 kids staring at me and having to, seem like I was great, or say my name, or like sing and dance, I just was like, I just want to disappear. This is just not, it was so uncomfortable. I couldn't have put it in those words, but just that feeling of 20 kids turning and looking at me was so overwhelming. All I could hear was like my heart pounding in my ears. I just wanted to disappear. And it got worse by far after kind of everything like exploded. I just did not like circle time at all. And I would actually feel relieved on the mornings when my mom would be late, which she was, because I would think, well, when she would get stressed, that would be a little scary. But the upside is I would probably miss circle time, which was like definitely outweighed whatever. I didn't like to see her stressed, but I felt very relieved if I arrived at school and circle time had already happened. That was a great day. So I was kind of like there dazed, just all these things were kind of going through my head. And I knew that everyone had seen what had happened, and that I couldn't just be there on my back for too long. I saw the kids that were on the climbing structure climbing down, and so I sat up and tried to seem like I was okay. And I realized I must be crying because like my nose is running. And I went to wipe my nose with the back of my hand because I did not have a tissue and there was blood. And I was like, oh, my nose is bleeding. And right as I'm realizing that, this girl in the class who always said, I wonder if she, like, I would love to know where she is, but she would always say that her name was Deborah, not Debbie. Deborah, not Debbie. Like, she did not want you to call her Debbie. So I thought her name was Deborah, not Debbie. And that is what I called her. So she comes running over and she kind of like, she's running toward me and then she stops really like suddenly, 3 feet away. She's staring at me and she looks like horrified. And she kind of like gives me like a once over and she screams, "Oh no, you're gonna die." And then this kid, Jack, like walks up next to her and he's nodding very seriously. And he says, it's true when you bleed that much, like if people who bleed that much, they die. And he did not look like sad about it. It was very matter of fact. He was like, that's true. So I thought like, wow, okay, like that's it. I'm going to die. Like, it doesn't sound like it can be stopped, like, I guess I'm dying. And I looked down and my jacket was completely, like the front of my jacket was completely just covered in blood. And my thought was my mom's going to be really mad because my jacket's ruined. And then this teacher arrives and she's got a first aid kit, but it was, the red first aid kit and it had like a cross on the front of it, but I thought it was a plus sign. So in my head, she had like a math box with her and I couldn't imagine like, are we doing math? Like what's happening right now? So she sat down in front of me and she asked me to follow her finger. She held her finger up and she asked me to follow, her finger with my eyes. But I think I was like moving my whole head and she said, not your head, just move your eyes, right? So I'm doing that and I'm seeing in my peripheral vision that Deborah, not Debbie, and Jack are also doing that. And I'm feeling super, like I just wanted them to go away. I just didn't want an audience. More kids were coming. But this teacher was being really kind. She was asking me like if anything else hurt. Did my legs hurt? Did my arms hurt? Was I okay? How was I feeling? Did my head hurt? Had I hit my head on, what landed first? Did I know? And one of the other teachers came over and they were talking, do you think she needs x-rays? Like what? So they were having that conversation and they decided that my mom should be called. So it turned out the teacher who had come over with the first aid kit was named Kira. And she said, I'm going to go to a payphone. I'm going to go find a payphone. I'm going to call her mom and, we'll figure out what to do. Maybe she wants to come and get her. We'll figure it out. And I wanted to go with her. And she asked me if I felt okay to walk. And I said that I did. And I stood up and my knees felt like, jelly, like not really okay, but I really wanted to go with her. And so we started holding her hand, we started to walk. And as soon as we got out of sight of all the kids, I asked her if she could pick me up, which she did. And she smelled like peaches. And my grandmother had smelled like roses. And it was just kind of like close enough that I noticed. We got to the payphone and she called my mom and I could hear my mom's voice through the receiver. And I hadn't seen my mom in a few days. I'd been at my dad's and I missed her. I missed her and I could, just feel that longing And I heard her asking if I had like hit my head, or if Kira thought I had, broken any bones. And Kira had been saying to me as we were walking to the phone that my mom would probably come and get me, especially when I asked her to pick me up. It was like, she said, you probably should get x-rays just to make sure, like you're probably okay. But anyway, so my mom said, okay, why don't we do this? Like, as long as she doesn't start acting strangely, like I'll come and get her at the end of the day. But if she starts to act strange, please call me back. So then I was thinking, like, what does that mean? And does my mom know that I'm going to die? Like, does she know that my nose bled so much? And Kira had told her I had a bad nosebleed, but I didn't know if my mom understood that my nose had bled so much that I was going to die. I did not know whether that had been conveyed or whether my mom understood that or not. And I just missed my mom, and I was scared, and so they hung up, and I started crying, and I told Kira it was because my nose hurt, but I could not even feel my nose. I had also like ripped my tights, and I had a very bloody knee. Anyway, we go back to the school, and Kira, she's just like with me. When I think back on it now, I think she was like extremely young. I don't know how old she was. I think she was like a young new teacher. She was so kind. She put me in the nurse's office. The nurse was not there, on a cot. And she brought me ice for my nose. And then she went and got a washcloth and a blanket. She just was very nurturing. And I don't know why it sticks out, but at the park, she had taken gauze out of that first aid kit. And she was just, I think just cleaning up the blood and stuff. And she had me leaning forward, not back, to make the bleeding stop. And she said something about the bridge of my nose. And I thought like, oh, she's calling my nose like a bridge or something. Like I guess she's confused, but like I like her. So I don't care if she doesn't know the right words for things. Anyway, when we got back to the school, and she was like, cleaning me up, she was so patient. She just kept dipping the washcloth into like warm water and just cleaning me up. I had blood in my ears because I had been on my back. I had like dried blood on my neck and in my hair. I mean, it was a mess. And she just was incredibly gentle and patient. She did not lose her patience. She did not hurry in any way. She kept asking me like, is that okay? Does that hurt? Is that okay? And when she was done, she like wrapped me in the blanket. She put her hand on my forehead. She said, I'm going to go get some books and come back and read to you. And I remember being really scared that she might not come back, that she was going to leave and she might get pulled away by another kid or by the other teacher. I think I was all at that time feeling very much like my mom would come home, she'd get me and we'd go back to the apartment. Some nights we would go to, used to be there, it's not there anymore. We used to go to the American Restaurant, which was this diner on 85th and Broadway. And I would get a grilled cheese sandwich, French fries, and chocolate milk. Probably the least healthy meal, just about. I ordered that so many times, and a chocolate shake, that they knew my order. I didn't even have to order anymore. I loved those nights because it usually meant if we were going to the American Restaurant that she wasn't going to go out. It didn't always mean that, but it usually meant that. And but what would happen on the nights that she wouldn't go out is that we would then go back home, and usually in a very short amount of time, she'd be on the couch watching something, she'd fall asleep. And I would I would watch her sleep. And I mean, like a little stalker, really. I would be right up on her, like watching her sleep, because I just missed her so much, I think. And she'd wake up sometimes, and I'd be standing like right there, and she would say, like, why are you why are you standing right here? And she would say to me, I'm not sleeping. I'm just resting my eyes. But she was totally sleeping. I would like hear her breath. And I just wanted her, I just, even on a good night, I wasn't getting a lot of her. It's just, I'm sure, exhausted. So I remember that feeling of just longing for her. And here is this teacher who I really don't even know that well, being incredibly nurturing and maternal and kind and patient. And so at a certain point, I had it worked out in my head that probably the way it worked is that when I would go to sleep that night, that's when I would die at some point, that this was my last day and I would go to sleep. And then, I don't know why I thought that, but that's what I had worked out in my 4-year-old head. And Kira said to me, you're going to be okay. Everything's okay. And I thought she's just being nice to me. At a certain point when she said she was going to leave to get books, I was afraid if she doesn't come back and I fall asleep in here, am I going to die here? Like, do you only die at night when you go to sleep? And so she did go to get books. She came back. She came back with Charlotte's Web. I remember because it was one of my favorite books. And I think by then I felt like she was safe. And I said to her, what time am I going to die? And she was like, what? Like, what do you mean? Like, you're not going to die? What do you mean? And I said, well, Deborah, not Debbie, and Jack said, like, I was going to die because, people who bleed that much die. And she was like, oh, you are not going to die. Like, you had a nosebleed, like noses bleed a lot. When you hit them, they bleed. That's what they do. You're not dying. You're not going to die. And she was so confident about that I believed her. And in my head, I had been thinking for like hours at that point, like, okay, well, if it's my last day and I'm going to die, like, I guess I'm going to go to heaven and I'll be with Nanny, and that, so, it'll be okay. And maybe it'll be like easier for my mom, because I felt like it was a lot for her. Like, I was a lot for her. But I was also feeling like I was going to miss her so much, my mom. And I didn't want to die, and I just started crying. I just lost it. I just started like crying. I think from everything, from like all of it, from just trying to keep it together for so long, and not having anywhere to put the grief of losing my grandmother, who I loved, like, with my entire heart, and losing my family, not knowing where people were, not knowing what was going to happen, feeling like I had to be good all the time or I might end up back at the farm. Like, I just remember worrying all the time that might happen. And just all of it, just feeling like it was okay to just like really cry. And she wrapped her arms around me. She was rocking me. She kissed the top of my head. She was just like, she didn't tell me to stop crying. She didn't tell me it was okay. She didn't tell me, she just let me cry. She just let me cry, and she held on to me. She held on to me so I could totally fall apart. And I don't remember if, I don't remember really I don't know if my mom took me for x-rays. I don't think so. I don't think anything was broken. I don't remember if she was upset about my jacket. Like, I don't remember any of that. I just remember this teacher holding on to me so I could just cry, and how amazing that was and how important that was. And it really stayed with me, that idea of like, that's the best thing you can do for people a lot of the time is just let them, you know, let them have their feelings, just be there with them, and just be there, And I was writing about, I went to the doctor on Wednesday. I made this appointment a few months ago because I've been writing about, I really had no idea if I was going to be able to afford health insurance in January, because I get my health insurance through the Affordable Care Act, and the subsidies are obviously not being extended, the additional subsidies. And so I had no idea if I was going to be able to afford any insurance. And so I made this appointment a few months ago thinking like, okay, well, I'll try to get in December and see if I can see, in case I need to see any specialists, just try to get all those appointments done before the end of the year. As it turns out, I was able to switch plans. So I basically have catastrophic insurance now. So if I end up in the hospital or something, I won't be bankrupt, and I get to keep my doctor, which is great because I really love her. She's one of these doctors who listens. There's no rushing. There's no, she asks questions and then she's listening and focused. And 100% just there. And I'm not going to get to see her unless I'm really sick. So, but it's just nice to know that she's still my doctor. And she asked me when I was there, how's your health? How are you feeling? And I said, I think I'm good. And it's a funny thing because I had to stop and think about it for a minute. How am I feeling? And I said, I think I'm good. I think I'm good. I said, except for the, kind of relentless despair and anxiety and rage, and fear. I think I'm good, and we both kind of laughed in that way that people do right now who are feeling that way, who are feeling so heartbroken over what is happening in this country and just, the way, just what's happening right now. We have a shooting at Brown University right now, literally currently right now. That's what's going on. I'm just so tired of it. I'm so tired of it. Of living in a way where it's just people are not treating each other with compassion and kindness. And we have such a short amount of time together that it's really heartbreaking that so many people are so angry and so they're just in so much pain that all they can do is lash out, and be hateful and hurtful. It's hard. But she's a Kira, my doctor, she's someone who you can say the things, you can be however you are. And I was saying, I think there are so many people in this world who are carrying those magical red boxes with the cross on the front of it, but they're invisible. It's the people that want to help, right? That are just, they care. And I certainly, have always tried to be one of those people. To me, that's a successful day. If I can be there, if I can make one person not feel alone, then I feel like, okay, that was a good day. I don't know what a better use of our time is than that. It's just to reach across, the interwebs, reach across the table, reach across whatever, and just let people know, like, you're not alone. And it's hard. Like, sometimes the world is really scary and confusing and overwhelming, and you're not in this by yourself. Like, I understand, and you can fall apart with me. It's okay. You're safe. So yeah, that's really what I was writing about, is just, people like my grandmother, who she was just all love. She was all love. And even though I only had her for such a short amount of time, the impact she had on me is like indelible. It really is. I mean, she's just like, she made such a huge imprint on my heart. I feel like she gave me the roadmap for love for my entire life. I've never had a day that I didn't think about her. And those people, that are able to stay with that and keep that as their kind of like true north, like, those are my people. So, yeah, I wanted to write about that this week and send that out there to you if you are hurting, if you're having a hard time, and just tell you that you're not alone and send some love. I know the world is really hard right now, but you're not in it on your own. So if you need some support, you know where to find me. And until next time, lots of love to you.